alleged number 10 party as well. So the latest on that. But let's meet my first guest right now. Kevin Baisley was a Royal Air Force navigator at Brize Norton in the 90s during the First Gulf War. When he lost his job because of his sexuality, everything changed. 22 years on, Kevin joins me now. Kevin, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. What were these always aspirations that you had growing up to join the RAF?
Yeah, as long as I can remember, that was all I'd wanted to do, was join the RAF and fly. I lived in Banbury, and we always had the F-111s from Upper Heyford flying over, and we went to air shows at Abingdon and Brize Norton itself, and it was just something I'd always wanted to do.
And what did it mean to you when you put that uniform on, actually, when you were a fully fledged member of the Royal Air Force?
Huge pride, that so few people get to wear that uniform and to serve their country. And it was incredibly proud to have that uniform, to know that I was an officer in the Royal Air Force. I was a trained navigator, air crew. So, very, very few people get that role. And so it was, incredibly rewarding. Yeah,
to actually tell us about that role, clearly a role you loved as well whilst you were serving. So tell us about what that role entails.
So as a navigator, I was responsible for the navigation of the aircraft, making sure that we got to our destination. But as a navigator on various roles, you look after so many things. So I was the weapons operator. I was on my last posting, I was on Nimrods in Kinloss. So I was actually responsible for tracking submarines, trying to find those submarines, and eventually potentially launching torpedoes and so on at those submarines.
Sounds like an incredible job, actually, and and a vocation. In fact, probably more so than a job, Kevin. And what about your hopes and your dreams when you were in the Air Force?
I mean, it was my forever career. I had every intention of seeing that career out to whatever level I could achieve before my retirement. There was no thought of going anywhere afterwards, or it being a short-term stepping stone to something else. I just wanted to be in the RAF.
But then everything changed, didn't it, actually, because you lost your wallet?
It did, yes. As I say, I was serving at RAF Kinloss on the north coast of Scotland. One day I realised I had lost my wallet, and the panic started to set in, because I knew that wallet actually contained a membership card to the Gay Bikers Motorcycle Club, which I had recently joined after coming out myself and trying to expand a social circle just to find other guys like myself.
Yeah, and you kept that from sort of separate to your RAF career, because, of course, the rules and regulations were that you couldn't be gay and serve in the RAF at that time.
Exactly. It was, I had only recently realised myself that I was gay. Up until that point, I'd been focused on my career. That was really all I was interested in. I had got married. I had 2 daughters. But eventually I realised that actually, something was wrong, and I was gay. Not that something was wrong, but I wasn't a straight man, and I wasn't going to be happy in that relationship, and neither would be my wife.
Yeah, what did that do? What did that do to you, knowing actually that, if you stayed in that relationship, you stayed in that marriage, you would live a lie, but also the fact that, because of the rules and regulations at that time, being in the RAF, if you came out and lived how you wanted to live, of course that was against what the RAF at that time stood for. What did it do to you?
It would have been the end of everything. I knew I had to hide myself. I knew that it wouldn't be acceptable, and that it would spell the end of everything that I'd hoped and dreamed of.
And it pretty much was, wasn't it? I mean, it absolutely was.
It was, yeah. At some point, someone must have found that wallet, and they handed it in to the RAF police. I have no idea who that was, and I don't know whether there was any malicious intent or not. It was probably just a good citizen handing in a wallet, and with no real knowledge of what was inside it. But the RAF police obviously looked through. They found the membership card. I was coming back from a training sortie. We landed. As typically at the end of the sortie, I'm tidying things up, putting them away in my bag to take off the plane. And the squadron commander gets onto the plane and walks up to me, which is very unusual in itself. And he just says, "No, don't worry about that. Leave it there and come with me." And that was it. That was, it was just like the end of everything. I felt it all crashing down around me as I was led off the aircraft past all my friends and colleagues, put into his car and driven up to the RAF police station, where I was arrested and interviewed and then suspended.
Sounds humiliating, Kevin.
Very much so, yes. You feel very, very small.
And then what happened? Because obviously, I mean, you have to have some very difficult conversations, I should imagine, with your family, with your daughters, with your wife.
Yeah, very much so. Up until that point, I hadn't come out to my ex-wife, so we'd been separated a year or so at the point I was discovered. But I hadn't been able to tell her why we had separated, so she was full of questions, and rightly so. So eventually I was able to tell her. My daughters were too young at the time to be told, but
what did she say?
From them.
What did she say to you?
She was actually, at the time, quite understanding, and the answer was along the lines of, "Oh, I thought there was something like that." But it was a very difficult conversation. I mean, we lost contact. It became quite bitter, and I lost contact with my daughters for quite some time before eventually they sought me out.
Yeah. So you lost, as you say, you lost contact with your daughters, and you lost your job. And sort of there, I suppose, began a very long process, because this progressed to a UK court, didn't it?
Yes. I wanted to fight this. From my point of suspension to my actual discharge from the RAF, that was 13 months in itself, and I tried every possible route within the armed forces to try and get them to turn over the decision to force me to be discharged, knowing really it was on a hiding to nothing, but I had to try as hard as I could. Once discharged...
What about, sorry to interrupt, but what about the support of your, your comrades, your colleagues around you as well within the RAF? I mean, obviously it was out there. Was there any communication and support from those people that you were serving alongside?
When I was suspended, I spent a couple of weeks effectively under house arrest in the officers' mess at RAF Kinloss. And obviously there were people that I had served with for a number of years living in the rooms around me in the officers' mess. And everybody was hugely supportive. Everyone was hugely surprised and about the fact that I'd been discovered as gay, but also they couldn't believe that, the investment in me as an officer and a navigator was going to be thrown away over this, despite the fact that obviously they knew the regulations as well. So there were no negative reactions at all within my peers and colleagues. But there was no real formal support either. Once I was suspended, I was sort of put onto the books at a local RAF station in Gloucestershire, but I wasn't actually on that station, so nobody contacted me. It was all through letters, and there was no support. And that's what most of the veterans who were dismissed, that was the biggest problem a lot of them had. They had no support. They'd suddenly been cut off from the family and the ties and the support networks that they'd had and relied on for years.
Does that scar you?
Oh, very much so. I'm 27 years on from my discharge, and I'm still have issues that derive back to that time and that moment in my life where everything that I'd dreamed and hoped and worked for came to a crashing end.
I mean, I suppose, it's welcome news, isn't it? As you say, 27 years on is a long, long time, but the Cabinet Office have now launched a review looking back at people who lost their jobs and medals under homophobic laws. How do you receive this news?
It's fantastic news. It really is great news. Such a long time coming. And if you think about it as well, it's not just the 22 years since the ban was lifted. There are veterans who were losing their jobs in the decades leading up to that. So some of these people have been waiting a long, long time for their stories to be heard and for the government to acknowledge what happened and how wrong it was and to do something about it. So to have this review is incredible. Long overdue, but very welcome indeed.
And what's life like for you now?
So life is good. In some respects, I have requalified since leaving the Air Force. I'm now a trained accountant. I'm married and to a man in Worcestershire. We've been together a little over 20 years ourselves. We've been married for 12 now. We have our own home. We both have jobs. Life is fairly good. Certainly better than some, worse than others.
Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It really has, and for you to tell your story so transparently. And I thank you for that. I really do, and I do wish you all the best. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing that story, Kevin. Thank you.